My father-in-law tried to destroy my career, so I bought his company and fired his entire family. I never thought I'd be writing this story, but here we are 3 years later, and I still can't believe how everything unfolded. The whole thing started when I married into what I thought was a normal middle-class family, but it turned out to be a nightmare that would change my life forever. When I first met my wife during college, she seemed like the perfect girl for me. We had everything in common, shared the same values, and dreamed about building a life together. She came from a tight-knit family that ran a mid-sized manufacturing business that had been in their family for 2 generations. Her father was the CEO, her uncle was the CFO, and her 2 older brothers held various management positions throughout the company. The first red flag should have been how cold they were to me during our engagement. Every family dinner felt like an interrogation, with her father asking pointed questions about my background, my family's financial situation, and my career prospects. He made it clear that he didn't think I was good enough for his daughter, but I figured time would change his mind once he saw how much I loved her. After we got married, things got worse instead of better. My wife would come home from family gatherings upset because her father and brothers would constantly make snide comments about me. They'd joke about how I was probably just after their money, even though I had never asked for anything and was doing well in my own career. I was working in business development for a tech startup and pulling in a decent salary, but apparently that wasn't impressive enough for them. The breaking point came about 6 months after our wedding. I had been working on a major deal that would have secured a huge contract for my company and likely earned me a promotion to senior management. I'd been cultivating this relationship for almost a year, and everything was finally falling into place. The client was ready to sign, and I was supposed to present the final proposal the following week. That's when my father-in-law decided to make his move. He somehow found out about my deal through my wife, who had innocently mentioned it during a family dinner. What happened next still makes my blood boil when I think about it. He reached out to my potential client directly and convinced them to cancel the contract with my company and sign with one of his business partners instead. But he didn't stop there. He then called my boss and told him that I had been sharing confidential information with competitors and trying to steal clients for my own side business. None of this was true, of course, but my father-in-law had a reputation in the business community and connections that went back decades. My boss believed him without even giving me a chance to defend myself. I was fired the next day. Not only did I lose my job, but my father-in-law made sure that word spread throughout the industry about my supposed unethical behavior. Every company I applied to had somehow already heard negative things about me. It was like I had been blacklisted overnight, and I couldn't understand how one person could have so much influence. My wife was devastated when I told her what her father had done. She confronted him, but he denied everything and convinced her that I was just looking for someone to blame for my own failures. The stress of unemployment and the growing tension in my marriage was eating me alive. I spent months applying for jobs, only to be rejected again and again. We burned through our savings, and I had to take odd jobs just to pay the bills. The worst part was watching my wife slowly start to believe her father's version of events. She never said it directly, but I could see the doubt creeping into her eyes. She started questioning whether I was really as competent as she had originally thought. Her family's constant whispers and insinuations were poisoning our relationship from the inside. That's when I decided I had to do something drastic. I couldn't keep living like this, watching my career and marriage fall apart because of one man's vindictive behavior. I started researching my father-in-law's company more thoroughly, looking for any weakness I could exploit. What I discovered was more interesting than I had expected. The company was actually struggling financially, despite appearances. They had been taking on debt to maintain their lifestyle and business operations, and several of their major contracts were up for renewal in the coming year. They were also heavily dependent on a few key clients, which made them vulnerable if those relationships soured. But the real game changer came when I discovered that my father-in-law's business partner, the one who had stolen my contract, was actually planning to start his own competing company. I found out through a former colleague who had inside information about the industry. This partner had been secretly courting my father-in-law's biggest clients, planning to take them when he made his move. I realized this was my opportunity. If I could get ahead of this situation and position myself strategically, I might be able to turn the tables on my father-in-law. I started reaching out to my old network, the few people who still believed in me, and began putting together a plan that would take months to execute. The first step was getting back into the industry, but not in the way anyone expected. I took a job with a small consulting firm that specialized in helping struggling manufacturing companies restructure their operations. It wasn't glamorous work, but it gave me insight into the financial situations of companies across the region, including my father-in-law's competitors. Through this job, I learned that several companies were looking to expand through acquisitions, and they had the capital to make it happen. I also discovered that my father-in-law's company was in worse shape than I had initially thought. They had been hiding their financial problems well, but the signs were there if you knew where to look. I spent the next year building relationships with investors and potential buyers while gathering intelligence about my father-in-law's business. I learned about their client contracts, their debt obligations, and their internal operations. I even found out about some questionable accounting practices that could cause serious problems if they ever came to light. The breakthrough came when my father-in-law's business partner finally made his move and started his competing company. Just as I had suspected, he took 3 of my father-in-law's biggest clients with him. This left my father-in-law's company in a precarious position, struggling to meet their debt obligations without those major revenue streams. That's when I struck. I had been working with a private equity firm that was looking to acquire manufacturing companies in the region. I convinced them that my father-in-law's company would be a perfect acquisition target, especially at the distressed price it would likely command given their financial situation. The beauty of the plan was that my father-in-law never saw it coming. He was so focused on dealing with the crisis caused by his former business partner that he didn't notice the other threats circling his company. When the acquisition offer came through, he was in no position to refuse. The company was hemorrhaging money, and he needed the cash to pay off his debts. The private equity firm bought the company for a fraction of what it had been worth a few years earlier. And here's the twist that even I didn't see coming. They offered me the position of CEO to run the restructuring. My experience in business development, combined with my intimate knowledge of the company's operations and client relationships, made me the perfect candidate for the job. I accepted the position immediately. My first day as CEO of my father-in-law's former company was one of the most satisfying moments of my life. I walked into the office that had belonged to him just weeks earlier, knowing that I now had complete control over the fate of everyone who had made my life hell. But I wasn't done yet. The company needed to be restructured, which meant making difficult decisions about personnel and operations. I had to cut costs dramatically to make the company profitable again, and that meant letting people go. Unfortunately for my father-in-law's family, they were the most overpaid and underperforming employees in the company. I started with my father-in-law's oldest son, who had been the head of sales despite having no real sales experience or results to show for his years in the position. His termination was based purely on performance metrics, but I made sure to document everything thoroughly to avoid any potential legal issues. He had been coasting on his family name for years, and it was time for him to face reality. Next was my father-in-law's younger son, who had been managing the production floor. He was actually competent at his job, but he was also making significantly more than market rate for his position. During the restructuring, I had to make tough choices about compensation, and his salary was unsustainable given the company's financial situation. My father-in-law's brother, the former CFO, was the trickiest situation. He had been with the company for over 20 years and knew where all the financial bodies were buried. However, I had discovered some irregularities in the accounting that required investigation. Rather than risk a scandal, I offered him a generous severance package in exchange for his resignation and a non-disclosure agreement. The final piece of the puzzle was my father-in-law himself. He had retained a small ownership stake in the company as part of the acquisition deal, which gave him the right to be involved in major decisions. However, I had negotiated a clause in the agreement that allowed the new management to buy out minority shareholders if they became disruptive to operations. My father-in-law couldn't help himself. He kept showing up at the office, trying to interfere with my decisions and undermining my authority with the remaining employees. He seemed to think that he could intimidate me into backing down, just like he had done before. But this time I held all the cards. I documented every instance of his interference and presented it to the board of directors. Within a month, I had enough evidence to trigger the buyout clause. My father-in-law was forced to sell his remaining stake in the company at a predetermined price, effectively cutting all ties between him and the business his family had built over 2 generations. The sweetest part of the whole situation was watching my father-in-law's reaction when he realized what had happened. He had spent so much energy trying to destroy my career that he had failed to protect his own company. His vindictive behavior had blinded him to the real threats to his business, and by the time he understood what was happening, it was too late to stop it. My wife was shocked when she learned about my role in the acquisition. She had known I was working in consulting, but she had no idea about the larger plan I had been executing. At first, she was angry that I hadn't told her what I was doing, but gradually, she began to understand the full scope of what her father had done to me. The revelation about her father's sabotage of my career was the final straw in their relationship. She had always known he was controlling and manipulative, but she had never imagined he would go to such lengths to hurt someone she loved. The family she had grown up believing in turned out to be built on lies and cruelty. Our marriage actually got stronger after everything came out in the open. The secrets and suspicions that had been poisoning our relationship were finally gone, replaced by a shared understanding of what we had both been through. My wife felt guilty about doubting me, but I helped her understand that her father's manipulation had been designed to create exactly that kind of doubt. The company's turnaround was remarkably successful. Within 18 months, we had eliminated the debt, streamlined operations, and secured several new major contracts. The employee morale improved dramatically once the family nepotism was removed, and people were promoted based on merit rather than their last name. I made sure to be fair and professional throughout the entire process. I didn't let my personal feelings influence business decisions, and I treated everyone with respect, even those I had to let go. Several of the former employees later admitted that they understood why the changes were necessary and that the company was better off without the dysfunction that had plagued it for years. My father-in-law's attempts to discredit me in the industry backfired spectacularly. Word spread quickly about the successful turnaround, and suddenly everyone wanted to know how I had pulled it off. The same people who had blacklisted me 2 years earlier were now calling to offer me opportunities. But the most satisfying moment came about a year after the acquisition when I ran into my father-in-law at a local restaurant. He was there with his wife, and they both looked tired and defeated. He had been forced to find employment with another company after losing his business, and from what I heard through the grapevine, he was struggling to adjust to being an employee rather than a boss. He saw me across the restaurant, and his face went pale. I simply nodded politely and continued with my dinner, but I could see the wheels turning in his head as he processed everything that had happened. The man who had once held so much power over my life was now just another middle-aged guy trying to make ends meet. I never gloated or rubbed his face in what had happened. That would have been petty and unprofessional. Instead, I focused on building the company into something even better than it had been before. The best revenge was living well and proving that his assessment of my abilities had been completely wrong. The experience taught me valuable lessons about resilience, strategy, and the importance of thinking long-term rather than reacting emotionally to setbacks. When my father-in-law destroyed my career, I could have wallowed in self-pity or spent my energy on futile attempts at immediate revenge. Instead, I channeled my anger into a methodical plan that took years to execute, but ultimately gave me everything I wanted. Looking back, I realized that my father-in-law's sabotage was actually the best thing that could have happened to my career. It forced me to develop skills and connections I never would have pursued otherwise. It also showed me what I was capable of when I was truly motivated to succeed. The company continues to thrive under my leadership, and I've been approached by several other firms about potential acquisitions and partnerships. My reputation in the industry has been completely rehabilitated, and I'm now seen as someone who can turn around struggling businesses. My relationship with my wife's extended family remains complicated. Her mother and some of her relatives still blame me for what happened to the family business, even though they know the truth about her father's behavior. But my wife and I have built our own life separate from that drama, and we're happier than we've ever been. Sometimes people ask me if I feel guilty about what happened to my father-in-law's family. The honest answer is no. They made their choices, and I made mine. They chose to use their power to hurt someone who had never done anything to them. I chose to use my skills and determination to build something better from the ashes of their destruction. The business world is full of people who think they can use their connections and influence to destroy others without consequences. My father-in-law learned the hard way that sometimes the people you underestimate are the ones who end up having the last laugh. He thought he was dealing with some naive young man who would quietly accept defeat, but he was wrong. Today, I'm the CEO of a successful company with over 200 employees. I make decisions that affect people's livelihoods and shape the direction of an entire industry. My father-in-law is somewhere out there, probably still wondering how everything went so wrong for him. The answer is simple. He forgot that every action has consequences, and sometimes those consequences take years to manifest. The whole experience changed my perspective on success and failure. I used to think that success was about climbing the corporate ladder and earning the respect of people like my father-in-law. Now I understand that real success is about building something meaningful and treating people with integrity, even when they don't deserve it. I've tried to be a better leader than my father-in-law ever was. I promote people based on merit, I listen to ideas from employees at all levels, and I make decisions based on what's best for the company rather than what's best for my ego. The culture we've built is completely different from the toxic environment that existed under the previous management. My father-in-law's company had been dying a slow death for years before I took over. The family infighting, the nepotism, and the lack of real leadership had created a company that was coasting on its reputation while its competitors pulled ahead. My acquisition didn't destroy a thriving business, it saved a failing one. The employees who remained after the restructuring have told me that they prefer working for someone who makes decisions based on business needs rather than family politics. They feel more valued and respected now that their contributions are recognized and rewarded appropriately. Several of them have been promoted to positions they never could have reached under the old system. I've also made it a point to give back to the community in ways that my father-in-law never did. We sponsor local events, provide internships for college students, and partner with other businesses to support economic development in the region. The company has become a source of pride for the community rather than just another family business that benefits only a few people. My wife often tells me that she's proud of how I handled the situation. She says that a lesser man would have sought petty revenge or tried to destroy her father personally. Instead, I focused on building something positive while letting the consequences of his actions play out naturally. The truth is, I never set out to destroy my father-in-law's family. I set out to rebuild my own life and career after he had tried to destroy them. The fact that his family members lost their jobs was simply a byproduct of running a business efficiently and ethically. If they had been competent employees who earned their positions, they would have kept them regardless of their family connections. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if my father-in-law had just accepted me as his daughter's husband instead of trying to sabotage my career. We might have had a cordial relationship, and his family might still be running their company today. But he chose to make an enemy out of someone who had never been anything but respectful to him and his family. The business world has a long memory, and word of my father-in-law's behavior eventually spread throughout the industry. Other business leaders began to distance themselves from him, not wanting to be associated with someone who would stoop to such unprofessional tactics. His reputation, which had once been his greatest asset, became a liability. I've learned to appreciate the irony of the situation. My father-in-law thought he was protecting his family's interests by trying to destroy my career. Instead, his actions set in motion a chain of events that ultimately led to his family losing everything they had worked to build. His vindictive behavior became the instrument of his own downfall. The company's success has opened doors for me that I never could have imagined when I was struggling to find work after being blacklisted. I've been invited to speak at industry conferences, serve on boards of directors, and consult for other companies facing similar challenges. My father-in-law's attempt to end my career actually launched it to heights I never would have reached otherwise. My story has become something of a legend in our industry. People talk about the young man who turned the tables on his father-in-law and ended up buying the family company. It's become a cautionary tale about the dangers of underestimating people and the importance of treating everyone with respect, regardless of their position or connections. I try not to dwell on the past, but I can't help but feel a sense of poetic justice when I think about how everything unfolded. My father-in-law spent so much time and energy trying to prove that I wasn't good enough for his daughter or his family. In the end, he proved that he wasn't good enough to run his own company. The acquisition and restructuring process taught me more about business than any MBA program could have. I learned about finance, operations, human resources, and strategic planning in ways that only come from hands-on experience. I also learned about leadership, both good and bad, from watching how my father-in-law's management style had damaged the company's culture. 3 years later, I'm still running the company, and it's performing better than it ever has. We've expanded into new markets, developed innovative products, and built a reputation for excellence that extends far beyond our local region. The employees are engaged and motivated, and our clients trust us to deliver on our promises. My father-in-law's legacy is complicated. He built a company that provided jobs for hundreds of people over the years, but he also created a toxic environment that ultimately led to its downfall. His children learned some hard lessons about entitlement and the importance of earning their success rather than inheriting it. I've heard through mutual acquaintances that my father-in-law has struggled to find his place in the world since losing his company. He was so defined by his role as CEO and family patriarch that he's had difficulty adjusting to a life where he doesn't have that kind of power and influence. Part of me feels sorry for him, but mostly I just feel relieved that he can't hurt anyone else the way he tried to hurt me. The experience changed my wife as well. She saw firsthand how her father's behavior could destroy relationships and opportunities. She's become more independent and confident, no longer seeking her family's approval for every decision. Our marriage is stronger because we've learned to rely on each other rather than external validation. Sometimes I think about what advice I would give to someone facing a similar situation. The most important thing is to stay focused on your long-term goals rather than getting caught up in the emotional aspects of the conflict. Revenge is a dish best served cold, as they say, and patience is often the key to turning the tables on someone who has wronged you. I also learned the importance of building genuine relationships and maintaining your integrity even when others don't. The people who supported me through the difficult times were the ones who knew my character and trusted my abilities. Without their help, I never could have executed my plans successfully. Looking ahead, I'm excited about the future of the company and my own career. We're exploring opportunities for expansion and innovation that would have been impossible under the previous management. I've also been approached about writing a book about the experience, though I'm not sure I'm ready to share all the details publicly. My father-in-law taught me an important lesson about the dangers of letting personal feelings interfere with business decisions. His hatred for me clouded his judgment and made him vulnerable to the very tactics he had used against me. In trying to destroy my career, he forgot to protect his own interests. The whole saga has made me more aware of the power dynamics in business relationships and the importance of treating everyone with respect, regardless of their position. You never know when the person you're dismissing today might be in a position to influence your future tomorrow. I've also learned to be more strategic in my thinking and planning. Instead of reacting emotionally to setbacks, I now take the time to analyze situations thoroughly and develop comprehensive plans for achieving my goals. This approach has served me well in both business and personal situations. The company continues to grow and evolve under my leadership, and I'm proud of what we've accomplished together. We've proven that success comes from hard work, integrity, and treating people fairly, not from family connections or political maneuvering. My father-in-law's company is now a better place to work and a more valuable business than it ever was under his control. In the end, my father-in-law's attempt to destroy my career became the catalyst for my greatest professional success. His vindictive behavior forced me to develop skills and strategies that I never would have learned otherwise. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened, even if you don't realize it at the time.